This month's podcast episodes are proudly sponsored by my own book, Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Have you ever had a great idea for a product? Or does creating a product to sell appeal to you? Where do you begin? How do you come up with a product idea? And if you have an idea, how do you know if it's even viable? In Bring Your Product Idea to Life, I take you through the process of creating your product step by step. From developing your product idea to finding suppliers and launching your product, we cover it all. The book includes advice on how to price your product, where to sell it, and how to find out if anyone will actually buy it. Designed to help you make real progress, Bring Your Product Idea to Life is both practical and motivational. Every chapter includes clear action steps so you know exactly what to do and when. This isn't just a book for reading, this is a book for doing. Bring Your Product Idea to Life is available via Amazon, on my website, and linked in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hello. So today I'm speaking to Georgie from Yogipod. At the help of Yogipod, Georgie helps people to find their calm, whether that's through the yoga props she hand makes from fabric hand printed in Jaipur or during the yoga classes she teaches online and in person. It all comes back to Georgie inspiring you to look after yourself a little bit more. I had a really great conversation with Georgie. So Georgie is a yoga teacher and she also sells yoga props. What I hadn't realised about Georgie is that she actually hand makes her products. And so we spoke a bit about being a maker and the balance between making and all the other aspects of your business. We also spoke about Georgie's background in fashion and fabrics. And we had so much really to talk about in this conversation. And I would love now to introduce you to Georgie. So hi, Georgie. Thank you so much for being here.
That's all right. It's a delight to be here.
So can we start with you please give an introduction to yourself, your business and what you sell?
So I am Georgie. I am the founder of Yogipod, which is a yoga products and lifestyle brand. My background is in luxury fashion. I studied fashion design and then was a luxury fabric buyer in London. Kind of fell in love with the practice of yoga to kind of help me through both the stress of uni and then the stress of working. And decided when I stepped out of the luxury fashion world to bring together those two loves, to kind of meld my love and respect for yoga into my love of textiles.
Amazing, thank you. And am I right in thinking, Georgie, that you are a yoga teacher as well?
Yes, I am. So anyone else who is a yoga teacher will know it is incredibly hard to make a living just purely from teaching yoga. You would have to be doing a lot of practices in a week. And I wanted to make sure that I was stretching kind of two different parts of my mind as well. So I adore the kind of community aspect of teaching and being there to be able to support people, but knew that I wanted to still kind of scratch that creative itch. So I do both kind of under the umbrella of Yogipod.
Amazing, thank you. And just because I'm very nosy, was that always the intention that you would teach yoga and have a range of products, or did one come before the other?
I mean, it was never really my intention to teach yoga. And I think most people who kind of go down the route of taking a teacher training kind of do it from a point of view of building on your own practice. And then it was just kind of a catalogue of things that kind of led me to a place of like, almost burnout. I don't think I actually got there, but it was definitely on the horizon, which meant I stepped out of the world of luxury fashion, not really with the intention of not necessarily coming back, but took kind of 3 or 4 months out. I had already done my teacher training and decided when I came back to the UK to kind of give the teaching a go, but kind of within that space of traveling, knowing that I wanted to kind of begin to play around with the idea of supporting people through kind of props and building that back into kind of handmade textiles and stuff as well. So it was a whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, these things are often not straightforward, are they? Not often very linear.
I don't think it's very often that we sit down and go, today I'm going to start a business and it's going to look like ABC. I think most of them are really natural and most of them come from a catalogue of things that have happened to you that mean you're just in that space at that time where you're like, well, I might as well give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned when you came back to the UK, were you traveling or were you working abroad at that time?
No, so I was traveling. So I never took a gap year. I did that thing of going straight from school into uni, did a 4-year degree, and then straight into the world of work. And I was kind of at that space, as I said, where kind of time in a particular job was coming towards an end. I knew that I needed to step out of it for my own kind of mental health and sanity. And instead of just jumping kind of out of the fireplace and into the fire, I decided to take some time out and really try and figure out what I wanted to do. So I went to India, Malaysia, saw some friends in Australia, kind of did some traveling around for 3-4 months, which was exactly the space that my brain needed and was a real privilege to be able to do, and kind of take that time to properly kind of figure out what you want. Because I think so often as adults, we obviously have to bounce from one thing to the next because there's bills to pay and there's adulting stuff we have to do. Yeah. But I was really, really lucky that I could kind of just take that time to decompress, which, whether it's 10 minutes a day or whether it is you're lucky enough to take a sabbatical or whatever, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, it's going to be really easy to just be reactive and just go from one day to the next, one month, year. Like, yeah, time can really pass you by unless you intentionally slow down a little bit.
100%. And it's so much easier said than done, let's be honest.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Speak to any yoga teacher and you'll know that our own practice looks entirely different to what we would suggest to anybody else. But I think there's times where you do just have to take a step back and go, right, where am I actually going with this? So let's just not repeat the same mistakes or things that I don't enjoy kind of again and again and again.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your products, Georgie. So what inspired you to create your yoga props?
So I was just really bored of props that were purely functional. I mean, I'm a really aesthetic being. I love things that look nice, hence kind of stepping into the world of fashion. And as both a teacher and a practitioner, every time I looked for bolsters or meditation cushions or eye pillows, they were just kind of like boring, navy, purple, just kind of fabrics that weren't inspiring. And I thought, particularly for a home practice, why can't something look nice? And if it's sat in the corner of the room or on the end of the sofa or on the bed or whatever, you're way more likely at the end of the day to take 5 or 10 minutes to yourself to kind of actually stretch or breathe or move. And so I decided to change that, as you do when you go, I know, I'll fix that problem. Yeah, it was just one of those things. I was like, why is nobody else doing this?
That's great. Thank you. And actually, it just occurred to me, for anyone who doesn't know much about yoga and doesn't know what we're talking about when we say yoga props, do you mind just explaining that for people? Because it's just because I've practiced for years, so I'm really familiar with this, but I've just occurred to me that not everyone will be.
100%. So the core range is a yoga bolster, which is like a big cylindrical cushion. Mine are filled with organic buckwheat hulls. So that means they really kind of move with you. They're used, primarily they were used within the practice of restorative yoga, which is where you make yourself super cozy, prop yourself up with these kind of cushions and blocks and just kind of rest. But they're also great for kind of making postures within a sort of the kind of class you're more likely to come across, which might be more of a flow. You can use them in order to bring the floor closer towards you, and kind of find a little bit more softness, which I guess is kind of what all props are for. They're there to kind of really support you and bring some softness into the body. I also do meditation cushions, so they're formulated more for actually helping you sit more comfortably on the ground. So for most of us, sitting cross-legged just isn't comfortable. It's not how our Western bodies are set up anymore. So just by raising the seat a little bit, it helps to lengthen the back, make it more comfortable. And then I guess eye pillows are one of those ones that will totally look random. They look a bit like the bean bags that you used to throw around in, well, I might be showing my age, throw around in like school sports days where you've got to throw them from one place to another. But they're used in order to kind of help you dial into that part of the nervous system that really helps you relax. So just by placing them across the eyes, either at the end of a yoga practice or as like part of your bedtime routine, they help you drop into that part of your nervous system, that rest and digest kind of space. So basically, we're here to try and help you feel a little bit better than when you arrived.
Well, thank you so much for explaining those. And of course, we'll link to your website in the show notes. Everyone can go over and see the products as well, because you've described them beautifully. But what's hard without seeing the picture is to see how beautiful they look, because as you say, they're so unique. They're not like, they're not like primary school beanbags, which are still used today. By the way, I go to sports days. They are still throwing beanbags around, but yours do not look like beanbags. They're very beautiful. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, so once you decided, okay, there's definitely a gap in the market, all these pops, they're very functional, but don't look nice. And I'm with you here, by the way, because I love things to look pretty. What happened next? How did you go about designing and getting your products manufactured?
So obviously my background is in sourcing. So that's kind of what I love. I love nothing more than a challenge of trying to find somebody who's going to do something in the right way. So I also had plenty of contacts in kind of the world of labeling and all of that kind of fun stuff here. And zips. I mean, don't get me started on zips. I could talk about those for months. Like all of that kind of stuff that I knew that I could fall back on a lot of my previous contacts for that. My main thing was making sure that I really wanted to work with block printing. That was something I rediscovered a love for when I was traveling around India. And the beauty of that for me is it's got a really handmade quality to it. It's every part of the design has been hand carved into a wooden block, and then it's hand printed. And from an energy perspective, I think that brings a really lovely grounding nature to a product that you're hopefully going to help ground yourself with. So I sought out finding an amazing block printed supplier, which they are a cluster organisation. They work with lots of other family run artisan workshops, which means everybody is working from home rather than kind of moving into factories and it all being a lot more sterilised. And so from a design perspective, I work with their archive of blocks and then I recolour them in order to kind of suit the range that I'm kind of building. I bring everything in as printed fabric. So for me, that kind of helps minimize the dead stock. I've kind of then holding it in its rawest form, which from a sustainability perspective means I can sew those things up, which I do myself in my studio. I can sew up what's actually selling and hold less stock in the things that aren't, which gives me way more flexibility than actually kind of working with a manufacturer where you've obviously got to meet your minimum order quantities, which was really important for me as a small business to kind of build in that flexibility, because I think that's what's beautiful about being a small business is we are super flexible and we can pivot like as much as we need to. And so that was really important for me as I was setting things up, was to be as flexible as possible. So even like, I mean, back to zips, but just going down to that, like the bolsters and the meditation cushions use the same length. So it means that I'm not holding kind of additional stock in components, etc. Everything is working really hard, just to minimize that kind of risk factor.
That makes sense. That's really, was that very deliberate? So from the start, did you know that you needed to, you wanted to use the same length of fabric for these different products? Was that a decision you took? Yeah,
so it's a decision that I took to try and make things as kind of interchangeable between different products as possible. I mean, having worked in the fashion industry, what often happens is businesses tend to really struggle as lines grow. And if they grow quickly, what often kills that kind of profit margin and all the rest of it is the holding of stock that's been made up that then doesn't sell, or that kind of explosion of slightly different variants of things, which means everything has got to be unique to that individual product rather than having stuff that's interchangeable across a range. So for me, it was about kind of keeping things as lean and as flexible as possible.
That's really, really smart. And are you making products to order, or are you making what sells? How are you managing that? Because the making must take you quite a bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, I've sewn for years, but yeah, what I do is, so for bulk orders, I'll make them to order normally, unless somebody is in a rush for something. But I keep a small amount of stock of kind of every single pattern and every single style. And then if for whatever reason, which the madness, which anyone who is a merchandiser will know, you can never guess what the public want. You'll go through a whole month of only selling things in grey, and then for some reason the month ticks over and everyone wants things in pink, and you can't figure out why, and there is no rhyme or reason. But what it means is that I can then restock what's selling well, but just keep that small amount of stock ticking over in what inevitably will be flavour of the month in 3 months' time.
That makes sense. And so I know I've got so many questions, but I genuinely am fascinated because how you're doing it is just so, well, as everyone's business is, so unique. So you mentioned the block printing. Mm-hmm. So did you have contacts who could do the block printing for you? Because you mentioned you're buying the fabric.
So no, India was not somewhere I'd worked with a lot before I started this, but I did plenty of research and I kind of found that I wanted to kind of support small. That's a really kind of important part of just generally how I run everything. If I can source something from a small business rather than a large one, then I will. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's labels or block printing fabric or other small businesses I'm collaborating with. And so when I came across the supplier that I used, the fact that they are a husband and wife team who oversee other husband and wife run artisan studios really appealed to me. It means that we might not quite have the kind of purchasing power for raw materials, etc., that going to a much larger block printing factory would be, and that things can be a little less flexible and take a little bit more time. But I'd 100% prefer to be kind of supporting them than ploughing money into kind of larger enterprises.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so they print the fabric for you, is that right?
That's amazing. So everything is hand block printed out there. So the wooden blocks are carved by hand out of either mango or rosewood. That's kind of one ridiculous skill set that is done within the villages outside Jaipur, and then they're hand block printed by whichever studio currently has space, and then all shipped over to me for them to become beautiful products that help you unwind.
Thank you for explaining that. And speaking of skill sets, see, I think you've got quite a unique skill set as well. So I'm really curious, because I know your range has expanded a little bit as well so are you coming up with the patterns for your products as well, as in how when I say the patterns, is that the right word, sort of how you put them together? Mm-hmm. Obviously you can tell I'm not a creative. So I think that's a skill in itself.
Yeah, so I pattern cut everything as well. Obviously the range has gradually exploded. We kind of started just with the simple yoga bolster, eye pillows, and then homewares as well, which is kind of a small line along the side, and then have gradually added clothing elements and the meditation cushions and the mini bolsters kind of all gradually happened as we've moved on. It's not been a quick process, and that for me was really important, to kind of like just gradually build rather than exploding everything straight away. So with the clothing, there are some bits coming in soon that I have pattern cut myself, but at the moment we're just kind of working with an amazing screen printer who is up in Manchester, and he screen prints products that are already on the market for me in that kind of clothing range at the moment. But yeah, I pattern cut as well. The joys of being a fashion girl who has interned in lots of different places and always worked for quite small businesses as well, which means you've just got your eyes on everything.
It does feel like you've got the perfect skill set for this. It really does feel like, all of your experiences come together so nicely.
And I'm really grateful for that, because I've got immense respect for anyone who steps into, whether it's running a product business or running a service business, where you've not kind of had any previous experience in it. I've like just taken a sideways step. This isn't something that's entirely new. I'm not having to learn new processes or new terminology necessarily. I mean, even when it comes down to shipping, one of my first ever internships was moving sort of components around the world for Mulberry. So like I know my way around a shipping manifest and commodity codes and all the rest of it. So it's one of those things that I'm infinitely grateful for, kind of everything I picked up along that road.
Well, I think all of us your skills obviously seem like a really good match, but I think all of us do definitely have transferable skills we can take into our businesses,
100%.
whatever our backgrounds. And there'll also be those things that we don't know and aren't as experienced in.
Oh yeah, like from the point of view of like website management and all of that kind of thing, I've had to just learn all of that. But again, it's that thing of being open to exploration and just reading as much as you can around the subject. And yeah, from the product side, I knew all of that. That was fine. It's all the other stuff and sort of marketing and SEO and PR and all that other fun stuff that you have to wear as a hat when you're a small business gal by yourself.
Yeah. And actually and you're right, there's so much more to it than just the product as well.
Yeah. You spend a lot of your life doing all the stuff that is tangentially linked to the product, but isn't actually the product itself.
Something I'm really curious about, if you don't mind me asking, do say if this is not something you want to talk about. So at the moment, obviously, you're making your products yourself. Do you have plans to outsource the manufacturing at any point, or to bring anyone in to support that? I'm just curious because your range is growing. Hopefully, your sales are growing, and I'm just interested, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, totally. So for me, the making is part of what I love. So never say never. But at the moment, I'm kind of keeping hold of that for myself. It's a time where I can switch off. I like stick my headphones on. I listen to a podcast. It's quite mindful. I'm just kind of moving through it. I mean, all the inners for the products are all made by a lovely small business up north. So that's all done. And like the homewares, like the gorgeous bed throws and stuff all come in pre-made from India, as does the clothing I've currently got going on. So it's a case for me about kind of looking at my workload and again, kind of balancing out what's new and what gets brought in that is possible for me to do. I mean, never say never. If I was going to do it, it would be a case of kind of, again, finding sort of other freelancers or again, sort of other small sewing studios that I would send stuff out to. I'm not interested in working with giant manufacturers. I've done that and it has its own sets of issues. And for me, like it's that conscious choice of surrounding myself by other small businesses and creatives. It's way more fun and it plums money into what I believe is truly worth something.
That makes sense. And it does seem, I think, yeah, working for a big manufacturer seems totally against like everything you believe in and how you set up your business. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But thank you for explaining that, because it's really interesting. Because I think that for lots of creators who are also makers, if you don't mind me using makers totally. As a phrase, I think that is always something to consider, isn't it? Sort of the balance between the actual making of the products and the business part of the business. But it's really good that you enjoy it and you want to keep hold of it, because I think we all have those parts in our business, because as you grow, hopefully lots of us can get to points where we can outsource some aspects of our business, you know, perhaps the parts we're not great at or don't enjoy. But there are always the things, aren't there, where you just think, I always want to do that. It's like, I'll be honest with me with this podcast. Well, it's different because it's me, isn't it? But I'm never going to, I can't see me ever, there are certain aspects of this that I can't see myself ever not doing because I love doing it.
I think it depends what your business goal is. I mean, if you're going into having a business where you're wanting it to be like 6-figure turnovers and all the rest of it, then that's going to be a very different relationship with outsourcing compared to if you're wanting a business that for me is people-centered and sustainable and there to support others. Then I think it's a different thing, and there's no right or wrong. And I think it comes down to what your goals are. Some people want to be setting something up that is almost fully automated, where you're an overseer of, which you can do from anywhere around the world. And others of us want to be involved and like to have our hand on product and be the person that is responding to customers and is packing orders and is writing those handwritten notes with every single thing. Because I mean, honestly, that's the thing that brings me the joy, is like seeing what people have bought, not on a spreadsheet, but when I'm packing them. And I think it depends. Like everyone's different.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really nice, is that we all can run our businesses how we choose to, because I'm completely different to you in that, funnily enough, when I had my products business, the first thing I outsourced was the fulfillment, because I hated packing orders. I liked it at the beginning when it was a novelty, but I'll be honest, a year in, I was just like, I don't like this. I'm no good at this. I'm covered in paper cuts. There's tape everywhere. I'm just not, it just wasn't in my skill set. And so I think it's really good, I think, to sort of consider, okay, what are the things that I want to do, that I enjoy doing, that add value? And what are the things that maybe I don't want to do, or don't want to be doing in a year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is.
100%. I think it's about looking at what outsourcing works for you. And that's going to be different for everyone. As you said, like for you, that was fulfillment. For me, it would be kind of getting to the point where I can begin to outsource some of like the marketing things, or like some of that kind of more back end stuff, which just takes an inordinate amount of time. Whereas I really love having a chat with the UPS guy when he comes to pick things up, and I really love packing things. I love the fact that now I own a tape gun, and it's great, and like all of those kind of things. Like I kind of just enjoy that stuff. I like that really hands-on facing stuff.
I think that really comes back to what we were talking about earlier, about how everyone's got their own experiences. So I'm sure there are people listening who run a products business, and maybe they have a marketing background, and marketing's the one thing that they will always do because that's in their skill set. And I think that's what's so nice about having these conversations, that everyone's sort of experience and journey is just so different.
100%. Yeah, I mean, we're all unique, which is what makes like the small business community so amazing. Is we're all coming at things with a different skill set and a different life experience and different passions, which is why it's so exciting. Even if you don't necessarily like love somebody's product, you can always see the value in what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a lovely segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is, can you talk to us a little bit, and you have touched on some of this already, Georgie, but can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing to make Yogipod both sustainable and ethical? Because I know you're making some really deliberate choices. As I said, you've covered some of this already around how you're running your business.
Yeah, so for me, sustainability and ethics is always a balance. Obviously, we do the best we can in the space that we're currently in. My two things are really kind of supporting small and then being as transparent as possible. So like the website has got a whole sustainability part of it, which has a full list of kind of everything that goes into every single product and its fulfillment and all the rest of it, and kind of where I am currently on that and what the plans are going forwards. Currently, like most components are currently either made from recycled or sustainably sourced fibers, or from the point of view of like packaging, everything is recyclable and sustainable. And that's really important to me. Like all of our zips are made from recycled plastic, our branding labels all the same, but there's still places that we can begin to move on. It just takes time. And again, it's about that balance. Like I was saying earlier with my block printers, I've made the conscious decision to stay with my kind of group of small artisan studios, which means because they are small, they currently don't have the purchasing power to be moving into organic cotton, which is something that not necessarily organic cotton is where I'm thinking of going, because it still has its own issues, but kind of that's something I want to begin to move into, is kind of helping them source some more sustainable fiber sources. But for me, it's more important to be supporting them than to be going down what is seen as kind of the silver bullet for a lot of people of like moving cotton to organic cotton. And that will come. And I think that's the thing about sustainability and ethics, is being transparent for me is the most important thing. So if somebody asks me a question, I'll go, well, first and foremost, the information is there. You don't necessarily need to ask, but also let's have a conversation about this. Because it can be really easy to kind of be sucked into that idea that everything is supposed to be perfect. And I think particularly for small businesses, we're really held up on a pedestal that nobody thinks about when you like pop into Tesco's and you need a t-shirt really quickly, or like those kind of things. And I think just opening that dialogue and being transparent with it is super important for me.
Definitely. And also, and you've alluded to this, it's not, I think it's not possible for us all to do everything at once, particularly as, you know, as you said, like the larger businesses aren't doing, in some cases, are not doing anywhere near as much as small businesses. And, you know, they have a lot more purchasing power and a lot more manpower and a lot more resources to do this. So, and you're totally right that people do seem to hold small businesses to a higher standard sometimes. But I think, as you say, there has to be a balance, because if you were to try and get absolutely everything as sustainable as you wanted from day one, let's say, you possibly wouldn't have launched your products yet, because there's always, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, all of us, there's always more we could do. And if we're waiting for perfect, we're not going to get anywhere.
No. And I think it's that case of like doing the best you can with your knowledge and your experience and the money, because let's be honest, it's expensive to run a product business. Buying more sustainable products tends to be more expensive because it means people are actually being paid in the supply chain, etc. And so again, it's that case of balance and like working out where your priorities are, because also like sustainability, I think the first thing a lot of people think of is kind of fabric and components and the rest of it, but there's also that human element to it. And you could be purchasing the most sustainable fabric in the world, but if it's being pushed through a factory where people aren't being treated properly, then that's kind of the other side of it. And I think it's that case of like balancing out where you are and what you can do at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And also knowing, as you said, that things will evolve as well, because, you know, what you're doing now and what you're doing, where you are in 5 years will probably be, you know, completely different.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, it's a constant moving forwards, and a constant refiguring out, and new things come onto the market and new ways of doing things happen. And that's exciting. Like, it's nice to kind of keep evolving and keep moving with it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we all, as you said right at the beginning of this, we all need to evolve as well, because the business you think you're going to have isn't necessarily the one. The business you think you're going to have isn't necessarily the one you end up with, I think is what I'm trying to say, because there's so much that's unknown. The world changes. Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest. The last 4 years have thrown us hundreds of new hoops to jump through, and yeah, it's a case of kind of bringing it back to what you were trying to do and bringing it back to what your customers love and chat to you about, and all the rest of it.
Definitely. And I think just what's really important is, as you have, just knowing what you stand for, what's important for you. So you've kind of got a vision and kind of guidelines you set for yourself is, okay, this is how I'm going to operate. And I think knowing that for yourself and your business is just a really good place to be.
Yeah. And I think also just acknowledging that you're not perfect, like particularly when you're one person. We all know like the days fly. There is only so much you can do. And so that for me is why I'm transparent about it, is I'm like, yeah, hands up. It's not 100% perfect, but this is where we are and this is where we're going. And that will happen. It's just going to take time because it's just me.
Definitely. And I think it's really good that you sort of say that as well, because I think sometimes people do need reminding.
Oh, none of us are perfect in anything we do, whether it's business or life or whatever. Like, we all mess up. We all have things we wish we'd done differently or wish we got the time to figure out and do in a different way. And it's a case of just kind of gradually like cracking away on those things.
Definitely. But I do still think it's really important for you to say it, because I think it's so hard sometimes to acknowledge that and accept it for yourself. Because, you know, we can all say that. But when it comes from us, I always think we're our own harshest critics, or I certainly am anyway.
Oh, 100%. Any review email that drops into my inbox, I open it through slightly squinted eyes, because I'm like, well, this is the one that's going to be awful. And none of them have been. But it's just your own little critic in the back of your head is the one that is always the loudest and is waiting for somebody else to realize that they've all got it wrong. And actually your little inner critic is the one that's right.
But yeah, but as you say, definitely not the case. Well, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us, Georgie. I have one final question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
So I had to think about this. It's really hard to pick one, but I think do something you're passionate about. From my point of view, it can't just be kind of sit down and be like, what's the thing that's going to make me the most money? It's like, pick something that you really, really love, because if you want people to buy from you, they have to know that this is something you swear by, that you use, that you love, that you are passionate about, because that's why we buy from small people, right? That's why we buy from small businesses. It's because of the story and the person behind it. So really think about what it is that you love and kind of craft something around that.
Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.